So when I told a friend I was coming to the Angular meetup tonight, we had all come to the Flutter meetup, which was a couple meetups ago, and we were sort of wondering, with Google's sort of track record with keeping products alive and everything, we were sort of wondering, does Flutter kind of compete with Angular? I mean, obviously Flutter is kind of based on Dart and Angular is based on JavaScript, but what's your sort of take on that, where like Flutter is trying to be the answer to the native the web eventually, and Angular is also kind of attacking that?
I would say that the developers we're targeting are a little bit different. So today, Flutter is primarily focused on iOS and Android developers building great mobile experiences. I mean, there's lots and lots of really great ways of building web experiences or using your web skill sets. And oftentimes, these things can be complementary. So like, for example, we worked really extensively with the Polymer team at Google I/O last year. Right? We were co-presenting a booth and things like that. So in general, we see these things as like, can we learn from each other? Can we work together? And we're always looking for those opportunities. I think at the end of the day, choice for developers is a good thing. And like at the end of the day, if there's things that make you a more effective developer, you should go find those and use those tools. On the Angular team, we really care about developers who like TypeScript, who like HTML. Those are people that end up using Angular.
Hi. Excellent presentation early on. I was just curious about your thoughts and opinions on the accessibility. You didn't really delve too much into it. I was just curious about the present and the future. I'm new to Angular, and my, I guess, passion is more about legal accessibility based on my background as an attorney and a software engineer. So I was just particularly curious about how you see it incorporating more of like automation or other tools to better with the accessibilities and having different user experience based on that.
So I didn't quite understand the question. So I heard a question about Angular accessibility.
Yes.
Then you said anonymization?
Testing, being able to see if it's actually being implemented correctly and other stuff. That's
Sure.
what I mean by automation.
Sure.
It's like Lighthouse for Chrome.
Yeah. So I think the Angular team, what we're doing is we're trying to bake both all of the best practices for accessibility into Angular Material, our component library, because that's where most of the work is, right? All of the other HTML that doesn't come from your component library is actually coming from you, and so it's up to you to create accessible components and follow, like, set all the ARIA properties, or all the ARIA attributes. So, I mean, Angular is used extensively within Google, and so we care about accessibility both from helping users, but then also from a regulatory and compliance standpoint. And so I don't specifically know about the accessibility auditing tools, but I know that Google has an internal audit of accessibility requirements, and Angular Material meets I think one of the highest bars.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the talk tonight.
Thanks.
Secondly, I think one of the companies that I'm talking with inside the city said they're still working with Angular 1.6 or something.
Yes.
Do you have any advice as to how to make a transition from such an outdated version of Angular less painful, other than update.angular.io?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did in last year was we actually built this thing called the NG Migration Forum. So if you just Google NG Migration Forum, what we tried to do is we tried to take a purely documentation approach at pulling together all of the best practices, because a lot of people are doing this and solving problems in this. So we've got like NG Upgrade, which is a core technology that allows you to blend AngularJS and Angular. There's Angular Elements, which can be used to take advantage of those strategies. And so there's all these different strategies that are right for different teams. And what we try to do is we try to put all of those best practices into one wiki that people could edit and contribute to. So it's called the NG Migration Forum.
Thank you.
Quick question. Thank you for the talk. The question I do have is, how do you get users, how do you get the developers to really, you can build the best tool out there, but when you don't have enough people using the tool, there's no momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I think there used to be a confusion, for me personally, a confusion between the AngularJS and the Angular, the tool itself, the CLI. Mm-hmm. And we all know the momentum of React right now. I've been to one of the meetups for the CLI team, Marco and his team, and I think they're building an exciting tool. But the key thing is how do you get enough people to use the tool? When you have multiple tools that users are using, I think a lot of developers, I think as a developer advocate, we're trying to get people to use our tool. And when we have so many tools out there, it's like we're trying to find out what tool can we use to do the job.
Sure.
And when you have a lot of tools, he mentioned the Flutter. You have Angular. It's like sometimes they're like, well, what's the best tool what's the best tool to use? Right now, I'm working with Gaps to CLI, and the reason it's speaking to Momentum is the fact that it has a graphic QI backend. So there's a lot of momentum involved in that, and I love what the Angular team are doing right now. The excitement between what they're doing, but it's just like, how do we get a lot of developers to really understand what? The functionalities in the tool itself.
Yeah, so I'll try and answer the several parts to the question.
So
Let me know if I'm not dissecting it correctly. So the first question that you asked was, how do you get developers to adopt a tool? So in general, the Angular team, our philosophy is about building a modern web developers platform. And so we're actually really focused on that problem, solving that problem of there's so many tools out there, there's so many choices in web development, by trying to make the Angular choice one choice, and then we solve a lot of the problems for you. So what backend should I use? How should I server-side render? What router should I use? All those problems we want to try and just bake into our solution. We have like 1.5 million 30-day actives to our site, so that we consider that a lower bound to the number of Angular developers out there, which means we have enough momentum to keep us going for 10 plus years in the JavaScript ecosystem, because we're one of the big players out there. When it comes to like our background and how we got here, I would say we were one of the first movers in terms of trying to build a framework and a platform that let developers build apps how they wanted to, right? Like we said, actually, Mishko's talked about this a lot. When he was first working on AngularJS, he said, what if we ignore what we have today? What would it feel like to build a web application? And so that's where AngularJS came from. That became really popular, and we've used that same sort of philosophy to try and push Angular forward. And we really do focus on this idea of we're serving web developers. So if you know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, we want to be a really, really great way for you to build applications that live everywhere.
Okay, and I think the key thing is no matter how good a tool is, if developers are going to adopt it and we can't get the support, we're not going to. We only will it's like when you're using a tool and you don't get the support, you're going to use a tool where you know you're going to get support.
Yeah, no, I would say that is a problem right now, where companies can't hire enough Angular developers. I think time will fix that.
And I love Google's direction, because they put a lot of tools out there and let the developers pick what they want. But the key thing also, you need teams to push it. I know we want to be, stay back, but you got to push it to get people to adopt.
Yeah, and that's part of what we do with our opinionation is, right? You make the Angular choice, then we're going to push you into best practices that ultimately end up serving your users, such as server-side rendering, such as like this component level lazy loading, these sorts of strategies. We want to bake those in, so you don't choose them, but you just get them.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say thanks for the talk as well. And so I just wanted to, since we're talking about 2038 and the future of Angular, I know that WebAssembly is coming up as sort of a popular technology. Obviously, I guess it's going to get turned into some kind of framework. How do you see that integrating possibly with Angular in the future? Do you have any opinions about that?
Sure. So I see WebAssembly as very similarly to how I see web workers, service workers, custom elements, which is these are really great foundational technologies. And if Angular can take advantage of them to make developers' lives better, we're going to do that. So for example, we could theoretically, in a theoretical universe, if this made sense at the time, compile all of the Angular parts of your application. We could rewrite our compiler into WebAssembly and ship that to the browser without you even knowing about it, if that was the right choice for runtime experience and bundle size and all these sorts of things. So we are actively looking at how the web is evolving, and we want to be a part of that. So for example, right now we're spending a lot of time on TC39, WhatWig, figuring out, okay, how's the web going to be evolving, and how can we both be a part of that evolution and stay in line with that.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I have one question and one suggestion. The question is there any plan to drop TypeScript from Angular?
Is there any plan to drop TypeScript from Angular? There is no plans to drop TypeScript from Angular.
The reason I'm asking is like when I'm trying to learn Angular JS 1.0, then I just used JavaScript. Then when I migrated to Angular 2,
okay. So are there any plans to allow people to build Angular
Yes.
applications with
Yes.
JavaScript?
Just pure JavaScript.
So I won't say we have any plans right now, but one of the design goals of Ivy, Project Ivy, is that you could.
Okay.
So for example, now that we are doing things like compiling the metadata down to a static property on the component, you could write a JavaScript compiler that does that takes the metadata somewhere else.
Okay.
Right.
So I will let you know the reason why I asked this question. It's like we have a lot of React developers within our team. We are planning to go with Angular JS. The problem is, if I want to develop an Angular application right now, they have to learn TypeScript. So it's very hard to them train on the TypeScript and then again go to Angular. That's the reason we are going with React. If the Angular is in JavaScript, pure JavaScript, we don't have to learn new language.
Sure.
Just have to.
I'll
That's
say
the reason.
Sure, I'll say two things on
Yeah.
TypeScript. So every team that I've talked to, after a week of using TypeScript, they're like, why would I go back? Like, there's virtually no debate once a team has moved to TypeScript. The other piece I'll say is, you're not actually learning a new language, you're learning a type system, but all of the types are optional.
Yep.
Right? So you don't actually have to type your services, you don't have to type anything, and TypeScript will be just fine. So we're just using the TypeScript compiler as the underlying thing that takes the decorator and handles the metadata and the compilation.
Yes, that 1 week plan, whatever you are telling, is okay for startup companies. The companies like big companies, they are, why to invest money, why to invest people on the new language? That's
Have you tried TypeScript?
I have worked with Angular 2 4.0, so
Okay.
I have tried. It's good. So that's the plan. If I am interested, I will learn. So
Awesome.
if a company is trying to build an application with Angular, why they have to?
Sure.
That's the reason. The second thing is, like, as you said, a lot of companies are using Angular for their internal applications. So even in our company, we are using it for the dashboard purposes. Like, we want to see our server, how it is behaving. So I feel like if Angular comes up with more tools for dashboards like charts, something like that, so it will be very useful for us. Like, we don't have to go to the external library to do. So that's a suggestion that I want to give.
Awesome. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. And I support your movement to the TypeScript personally.
If anyone's had a bad time with TypeScript, let me know, because I have not heard any of those stories yet, and I'd love to hear that.
Okay, my question is, could you compare in maybe 3, 4, 5 items Angular as it is and as it would be with the React?
No. So I mean,
Just
Angular.
maybe
So
some advantages, disadvantages that
so
you see in the
I'll
different-
say some of the ways that we think we're different, but I mean, I will say we love the React folks. We actually try and collaborate with them as much as possible. So I mean, I think Angular is trying to be opinionated. So we are trying to say, here is a whole bunch of technologies that are all integrated that work together fantastically. We like declarative templates. We feel like the declarative templates allow you to work in HTML and have people that know HTML defining UI and layout and things like that. There's also some kind of secondary benefits to declarative templates that we can take advantage of in the future, such as, for example, if you have an async pipe on a div, we can actually do change detection at the level of that div instead of at the level of the component. So there's some advanced performance optimizations that we could be doing. What else? I think people should use what they want, but that lots of people like Angular.
Thank you.
So I have a question about another framework which came from Google, Dart. Are you familiar with this framework?
Dart is a language, not a framework, but yes.
Okay, so like looks like they kind of try to solve similar kind of tasks. So maybe if you can speak kind of a little bit about those two technologies, both coming from Google, compare them, and why somebody would like to use Dart or Angular in some situation.
Sure. So what I will say is Dart is a language, so it is an alternative to JavaScript, whereas TypeScript is trying to be an extension of JavaScript. And actually, so the Angular team, as of 2.0, as of our early release that we were doing with the last kind of 3-4 years, we were building Angular and TypeScript and compiling to JavaScript and to Dart. So we were actually empowering both of those technologies. And then what happened was we spun the Dart team off into a separate team to maintain Angular Dart, to remove the overhead of maintaining both of these things. So what I'd say is, if you like Dart, you should go use Dart. If you like JavaScript and TypeScript, you should go use Angular.
So I think the idea with Dart was like you kind of replace JavaScript. If I'm correct, maybe I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So you have
funny.
a better language than JavaScript. That was the idea from Google, I guess.
So I'll tell a short story. So I was at Google I/O, I think it was 2012, when Dart was announced. And I wasn't working at Google at the time. And I went downstairs into the lunchroom, and I sat down with these two guys with Dart shirts on. And I'm like, oh, what do you guys think of like Dart versus JavaScript? And they're like, oh, well, we wrote Dart. And then I'm like, well, okay, what about like performance? But like they've been improving V8 like so much. Like Dart has these performance characteristics, but the V8 team's doing so great. And they're like, oh yeah, we did V8. So I think that like Dart is amazing from the perspective of what they can do from a performance standpoint, especially just directly in the Dart VM. But what's kind of emerged is two worlds: people that want to write Dart and people that don't want to write Dart.
Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.
What version of Angular right now?
Do you want to? So he asked the question: what version of Angular right now? So if you are on latest, you will be using 7.3, I believe. And in a month or so, maybe 2 months, you'll be using 8.
So, I mean, we see people asking questions, right? I'm sorry. See people start talking about 1.6. I mean, that's such a...
Yeah, so we have, so there was a big shift. So I talked a little bit about the history, but we had AngularJS. And then we did what happened was we built hundreds of thousands of applications. This ecosystem kind of exploded, and then what happened was we saw the ways that people were hurting themselves in regard to change detection, digest cycles, et cetera. So as of like 1.6, we started working on a rewrite, which was Angular. The other thing that happened in that meantime was that the web evolved, right? We had built all these concepts in AngularJS, such as modules that are now just a standard part of the platform. And so we wanted to take advantage of those and address all of the underlying problems of how developers were shooting themselves or their users in the foot. And so we took the same philosophies of AngularJS and rewrote it in Angular.
Do you believe with the skipping of 3? That's always sort of bugged me personally.
Do I believe in the skipping of 3?
Yeah. Angular 3.
I think semantic versioning says that the numbers don't matter. We made a promise that there would never be an Angular 3. We kept that promise. Yeah, so back when this was like 4 or 5 years ago, back when they first announced what at the time they were calling Angular 2, which we now call Angular, and people were worried about like, when are you going to rewrite again? When's there going to be Angular 3? And we made a promise at that point that there'd be no Angular 3, that we're not going to rewrite. And we are still not going to rewrite.
Great. Any final questions?
Yeah, while he's running the mic over, I'll make one more point. It's kind of funny. Like semantic versioning says, we could be at version 9 tomorrow with no changes. Like the only expectation that we're setting is that there can be breaking changes in a major. But I think the community has been very happy with our cadence. Like the 6 months, people are keeping up to date, and they're taking advantage of the best practices. And most Angular apps are up to date. And so we really do want to achieve this mentality where we stop focusing on the number.
Well, thank you for your presentation. You know exactly what you're talking about. I think my question is about, you're thinking about did you say
2038.
2038. This is 1989. Yeah, so you're thinking about 20 years from now?
Yeah, so this really comes down to the philosophy of ng update. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. I really believe that. I don't think we have a way to forecast anything more than 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, and on 2038, you can tell me I'm wrong. Happy to hear it. But it really comes down to the philosophy.
We'll have you back.
What's that?
We'll have you back.
You'll have me back? Okay. 2038, same day. ng update is our philosophy where we want, every time the web changes, every time the ecosystem, when WebAssembly takes over, we deprecate JavaScript forever, we want your Angular apps to still keep working, right? We want to keep evolving with the platform so that we're not deviant from it, so we don't have to do a rewrite ever. And so that goes into our philosophy every day. If some web spec changes that says put the export at the end of your symbol name, we will update Angular and we'll update your apps for you. With no backing, but I mean that is our intent. We spend all the time doing that.
You heard it here first. All right. If there's no other questions.
Money back guarantee.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have you back in a few years. Let's have another round of applause for Stephen.